Grace and peace, everybody. Welcome to Berean TV, Racism and Religion. I'm involved in a couple of different blogs and the YouTube thing I have going on, but on Facebook there's an ongoing discussion on various religious topics. And one young lady, she wrote in and she's kind of distressed because her sister, she's scared that her sister is going to walk away from the church because her sister's asking questions about the Bible and the historicity of certain things in Scripture and Jesus and what color Jesus was. And she's asking for different people's opinion that's involved in this discussion with, that we have various theological topics on. And surprisingly, so many people are telling her Jesus has no color, or don't worry about Jesus' color. And that's very interesting. A lot of people, when it comes down to it, ultimately in spirituality, when you're dealing with spirituality, color makes no difference. But here in the world, here in the West, especially in America, color makes a big difference. So, do we just continue to use the image of a European Jesus if we know that image, historically speaking, is false? A lot of people say, "Oh well, I don't know him after the flesh," like the Apostle Paul says in his epistle. But color is important. Color is important. Images are important. We have images. We have all type of images. When I look around, I see that in Jamaica, for instance, there's a lot of women that's bleaching their skin. There are a lot of Korean, there are a lot of Asian women that are getting operation on their eyes so they can look more European, because the European image is the dominant image that we see on television. Now, for European Christians, I expect them to say it doesn't make any difference what color Jesus was. They would say stuff like that, but they'll be like, it doesn't make a difference if we use that image of Jesus, because they're part of the dominant culture, and that's the dominant image that has been handed down to the entire world of a European Jesus, and is part of the dominant culture. So if they're benefiting off of that as a dominant culture, I don't expect them to say anything against the image. But other people, is it good for what they would call minorities or other ethnic groups? I don't even like to say race, because they would, I believe, I forget the gentleman's name, a German European invented the so-called anthropologist invented the notion of race. There's only one race. Through one blood, he has created all nations that dwell upon the face of the earth. But we have people that have been propagating this race notion. There's different races, and ultimately that's one of the great mysteries that people don't understand, that there's only one race. There's the human race, but there's different there's different tribes, there's different groups of people, but there's only one race. And there's been people that's been promoting this one dominant race thing. When we go back to Hitler and so many other people, they've been promoting this. And the darker your hue, or the darker your skin color, the or lower down you are on the scale. We see it among the Hindus with the when the Aryans came or took over Hinduism and this and that, and they formed their caste system and everything. And interestingly enough, we see it also in Judaism, in the Babylonian Talmud. A lot of my Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters, they start screaming about Kostler's book, Arthur's book, The 13th Tribe, and how European Jews, they came on the scene in the 10th century. And we had European Jews on the set before the 10th century. We're going to talk about that in Sunday seminary. If you look at the Babylonian Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, there are two sets of Talmuds, and they come from 200 in the Christian era, 200 AD to 500 AD, and they come from an older oral tradition. The Talmud, there's racism in the Talmud. It says forest copulation on the ark, and they said the dog copulated, the raven copulated on the ark, and Ham did also. And they said Ham was cursed with dark skin. That's the Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 105 or something like that. Y'all can just Google that. The Babylonian Talmud and racism. And that was written by European Jews. Prior to Kostler's book, The 13th Tribe, prior to the 9th century, there were European Jews in the 2nd century. There were European Jews, some would even argue in the 1st century, that Christ was speaking to when they said in John 8, the Jews said to Jesus, we were never in bondage. Now, if they were original Jews, some argue from that portion of scripture, if they were original Jews, they knew that they were in bondage in Egypt and they were in Babylonian captivity. So who were these Jews that were addressing Christ, telling Christ that they were never in bondage? But racism has always is a strong thing in a religion. And we have to be careful with that. So when, as a Christian, someone says, well, Christ's color doesn't make any difference. In the spirit realm, it doesn't make any difference. But in the natural, where people have been using certain images, and there's a dominant culture that have been historically oppressing other people. If you're a white Christian and you really love Jesus, you'll have to accept this. And if you're a black Christian or any other ethnic group of Christian, if you're Mexican, if you're Hispanic, if you're Korean Christian, whatever it is, you have to accept certain things as truths. And historically speaking, that European image has been a problem. So when we say the color of Jesus doesn't make a difference, are we wrong? Are we wrong in saying that? And the second thing is, the sister was saying that she was afraid that because her sister was now asking questions about the historicity of Christ and the color of Christ, that she was going to turn and become an atheist. She was going to walk away from the scriptures altogether. Scripture says that we need to be able to give an answer to every man that asks us according to our faith. So she definitely have to start answering some questions. We're living in a time where YouTube and the internet and information is out there. We just can't go about in the church or in the synagogue as business as usual, because it's not that. It's not going on. People want answers. They don't want to just go to church and holler and jump up and down. They want to sit down and they want a reason. They want a reason. They want to understand certain things. And in light of cultural oppression, in light of what's going on, I don't really believe that we can sit back and act like the color of Jesus doesn't matter. Now, I see other people, like I say often on Sinetta TV and different conscious circles, that speak about the European image of Jesus. I thank the Most High that in the last 20, 30 years, and I've been in church, the last 20 or 30 years, we don't really see images of Jesus in the church no more. Once in a while, you'll go into a smaller Pentecostal church and you may see an image of Jesus. Besides the Catholics, they've always had images or icons because they understand the importance of icons and symbols. And we'll talk about that later on, how symbols and certain things from the mysteries and from paganism and from ancient wisdom traditions have always come down. There's always been two streams of knowledge coming down from the Garden of Eden. We'll talk about that later on in some other upcoming videos. But does Jesus' color matter? It has to matter in the time and the season that we're living in, with so much oppression going on. You've been watching Berean TV. If you like what you heard, subscribe. Thank you for watching.